Hello friends, my name is Alex Caretakers, and I want to welcome you to the Mysteries of Monte Rey, California through my Finding Lost Civilization series. This series is about taking a journey into our past and visiting ancient sites that time has long forgotten. Today, I'm standing on a hill overlooking Monte Rey Bay, the Pacific Ocean, on a place called the Presidio of Monterey. And directly behind me, you'll see a monument. Now this monument commemorates the date of 7 July 1846, when Commodore John Sloat of the U.S. Navy sailed into Monte Rey Bay, landed ashore with troops, and took possession of Monte Rey from the Mexican government, and proclaimed this territory, which was called Alta California, as part of the territory of the United States. Now, several hundred yards below the Sloat Monument is the site of the old Spanish fort originally built by the Spaniards when they landed here in 1770, and that fort is referred to as El Castillo. Now, several hundred feet behind the Sloat Monument are the remnants of Fort Mervine, and this is the fort that the Americans built after they took possession of Monte Rey, Alta California, from the Mexican government. And so, as you can tell, the local history here in Monte Rey revolves around the arrival of the first European settlers to this area. And this was an expedition led by Caspar Portola in 1770. And of course, the Sloat Monument, which is dedicated to an event that occurred in 1846. However, I am now standing at a spot several hundred feet away from the Sloat Monument, which is Monte Rey's least known and oldest landmark. It lies here, unknown, unrecognized, and unheralded. But today, we're going to visit it. Now you might ask yourself, well, what is so significant about a boulder, and why would this boulder be a landmark? Well, this boulder is actually a petroglyph. Now let me explain. Petroglyph is a Greek word. Petro means rock and glyph means inscription. In other words, this boulder contains symbols, inscriptions, carving left here by the ancients who preceded the arrival of any European in North America. Well, friends, let's take a look at this ancient petroglyph boulder and examine the symbols that were left behind by the people that preceded us. Well, friends, we're approaching this boulder, which lies several hundred feet below the Sloat Monument. This boulder is of granite composition, and as I approach it, I am starting to see the symbols. Can you see them? Can you see these grooves directly here in front of us? Now, these grooves in this boulder are not naturally occurring. There are 43 randomly placed grooves in this granite boulder. Now, the interesting thing about these grooves is that they are known as cupules, and this form of petroglyph style is found in all continents of the world except the Antarctic, and they are very ancient. Friends, the oldest cupule petroglyph in Europe is thought to be approximately 70,000 years old. However, the oldest known cupule in the world is located in a cave in India, and those cupules are thought to be anywhere from 300 to 500,000 years old. Now that is very ancient. Now these cupules are symbolic in nature, and they meant different things to different cultures around the world. The actual meaning of the cupules here at the Presidio of Monterey is unknown. The ancients who lived here at the time that the Spanish arrived were known as the Rumsen Indians. Now the Rumsens had an oral history, and the true meaning of these cupules here at the Presidio of Monterey is actually unknown. Well, the interesting thing is that even though the true meaning of the cupule symbol here at the Presidio of Monterey is unknown, we know that the symbol is used throughout the world and here in California with other native tribes. So there is speculation that the cupule symbols here are some type of reference to an effort to make rain. It's a rain-making symbol. Other references are that this might be somehow connected to a fertility rite, to an effort by women wanting to bear children. As I said, this is all speculative, and this is the closest that we can come to what this boulder may mean. As I said, its history has been lost in time. Well, another interesting thing about this petroglyph boulder is that it actually sits on what is referred to as a shell midden site. Now this shell midden site is very large. It's several acres and stretches all the way down to Monterey Bay where it meets the Pacific Ocean. Now the significant thing about shell midden sites is that they tell us that the area was once occupied. Shell midden sites are areas where the ancients processed their food and left the refuse behind. Oftentimes, these refuse sites are located where the village was or nearby. Now, some people say that the Presidio site once housed the Rumsen Indian village of Acasta. Others say this is the site of the ancient village of Hunukul. Now, Hunukul refers to hummingbird. But again, this is all speculative. There is no written history. There is no written record of the name of a village at this site. However, we do know for a fact that it was occupied. So, let's take a look at the ground below and around this boulder. Let's examine a shell midden site. Now, tell you what, it's very surprising because these shell midden sites reveal the dietary habits of the ancients that once lived here. Well, as we examine the earth below this boulder and around this monument, we can see layers of earth that have been brought to the surface.
Now much of the dirt and the items brought to the surface were dug out by burrowing animals, such as the gopher, and they provide us with a window into the past. So let's take a close look at one of these mounds.
As I've mentioned, these small burrowing animals bring to the surface much of our old ancient history. Look at this over here, right here. This here is an abalone shell. This was a food staple for the ancient Rumsens that lived here. Let's till the soil, let's see what we can find. Here's another abalone shell. And look at this, right here is another completely different type of shell. Let's continue to tilt. Look, here's another one right there. Here's another abalone shell. What's this here? Let's take a look. Look at this. My goodness. This here is a stone that has a sharp edge to it right here. Look at this. See how it fits in my finger. This is what's called an ancient scraper. This is a Stone Age tool. It's used to scrape away at mussels, at food, skins, maybe even to cut. Look at this. This is an ancient tool. Look at this over here. What's this? Oh my goodness. This is a bone. This is a bone. And look over here, you can see where the socket was for another bone. Friends, this is very exciting. In our hands, we are holding objects that the ancients once held in their hands. These items are hundreds and maybe thousands of years old. Friends, below the slope monument, there are several buildings that I've often passed by. I never paid any attention to them. However, these buildings are a part of our recent history that is quickly fading away. These crumbling buildings are former horse stables, occupied by the 11th Cavalry Regiment. stationed at the Presidio of Monterey at a time when the Army still had mounted horse cavalry. Now, the advent of World War II ended the days of the horse cavalry forever. In 1942, the 11th Cavalry was the last horse cavalry in the Army, and in July of that year it was redesignated as the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. I can still hear the faint beating of drums, and we are so fortunate to be able to see, hear about, and touch something that is a part of all of us. Friends, this is the area where the former Spanish fort known as El Castillo used to be located. Look at this majestic view overlooking the Monterey Bay. And the interesting thing is you can see how the natural slope of this hill was used as a location for the fort. You can actually see the original earthen works of the fort over here. This is really an interesting discovery. Look at this right over here. You can see, if you walk this area, the natural inclination, this upward slope, this bank over here was part of the ramparts to the El Castillo. You can actually see some of the original stonework building up the ramparts. Look at this over here. These stones were placed here by the Spaniards as part of the El Castillo ramparts. And look what I noticed. Right up here is a gopher hole. And a wonderful thing about this gopher hole is it brought up a piece of ancient history. Look at this. This is part of an adobe brick that was used to build the fort. This piece of adobe was once held by a Spanish soldier as he built the ramparts or the residences and quarters around the El Castillo area. And so, we'll let this little bit of history lay where I found it. As the old saying goes, from dust to dust, whence we came, it shall return. Friends, not too far from the site of where the El Castillo used to be situated, as you follow the lower perimeter, you will encounter two ancient grinding mortars. And the wonderful thing about these grinding mortars is that they, again, remind us they are evidence that the ancients once inhabited this area. Also, if you look at the ground around the grinding mortars, you will see the remnants of the food items that the ancients processed around this grinding mortar. Here you can find elements of these shells just laying about the... What? Look at this. Oh my goodness. What the heck? Look at this. This was laying right over here. Let's take a look at it in the sun. What is this? Okay, it's a metal plate. It's a metal plate. What could it be? Is this a hasp? Oh my goodness, look, look. Look at this, right over here. See how thick this is? Okay, this is thick here. Right over here, it's thin. This is the remnants of an old sword. This is the remnants of an old sword. Look at this, my goodness. Right over here, hopefully you can see it, it's thick. Look at the width over here, and over here, it's a sharp point. My goodness, this is, this is amazing. This is amazing. Several hundred feet below the slope monument and close by these ancient grinding mortars is a memorial cross dedicated to a person called Alexis Nino, dated 1770. Now I asked myself, who was Alexis Nino? I'd never heard of the name before. Well, the interesting thing about this history is that when Caspar Portola came here into Monterey Bay and claimed this territory as part of Spain and calling it Alta California, it was actually a very vast area. People think of today's terms of Monterey, the county of Monterey, the city of Monterey, the state of California. Well, at that time, Alta California's borders were somewhat undefined, but generally speaking, it went all the way up to where the British were at that time, which is British Columbia, and it went out west towards Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming. So it was a very large and vast territory. So again, I asked myself, how is Alexis Nino connected to this, that a monument would be erected dated 1770? Well, Alexis Nino was a ship's caulker on Caspar Portola's expedition, and when they landed ashore here and established the settlement, he was the first person from that group to have actually passed away. Now this cross here does not actually signify the final resting place of Alexis Nino. Several years ago, when a roadway was being built here at the lower Presidio, which is now called Lighthouse Avenue, there was a series of bones found there, and there's speculation that perhaps those were the bones of Alexis Nino, and this would have been in the area where Caspar Portola actually first landed. Friends, I've had a wonderful time here at the Presidio of Monterey, and I hope you've enjoyed this trek with me. If you come to this area to visit the Slope Monument, please take a few extra minutes, take a few extra steps to visit this ancient petroglyph boulder. The history of Monterey is much older than 1770, when the first Spanish settlers arrived to this area. The history of Monterey is thousands of years old, and the fascinating thing about the Presidio of Monterey is that you can see it all right here under your feet and around you. Now, one of the things I want to mention is that this area is a federal reservation. So please don't dig for any artifacts or harm any objects in this area. Well, friends, before I sign off, let me invite you, come with me, trek with me, as I wander through Monterey in search of ancient sites that time has long forgotten.